For a new generation, the path to becoming a journalist is riddled with challenges. From job insecurity, low wages, and declining circulation and viewership of news. These are supposed to be the voices of tomorrow, but do they want to tackle the weight of the news industry? Journalism has always been about asking the tough questions and speaking truth to power, but for the next generation of journalists, entering the field isn't just about what they report. It's about confronting their own fears. Fears about job security, salaries, lack of public trust in media, a rise in artificial intelligence, and declining circulation and viewership of news. These fears materializing at a time during students' lives when they're trying to navigate a rapidly changing news industry, dominated by fast news cycles and social media. There are plenty of uncertainties in the journalism industry, and while plenty of young journalists are still showing up and finding their place in the newsroom, the current state of journalism is actually causing other students to quite literally leave the field. So, what's behind all these fears?
It's so concerning as somebody who is not fully in the industry yet.
The journalism that we used to have is no longer, and there's really a lack of jobs.
The LA Times, right before I had started applying to places, had laid off like a huge chunk of their newsroom.
When you see layoffs like that, it very much deters you from wanting to go into that field or that industry and makes you kind of rethink your future.
Like, how can I expect people to even hire me when everybody is being laid off? Like, they're laying off more people right now than they are hiring.
It may not come as a shocker, but salaries were a major concern for young journalists.
It's definitely not just a journalism problem, but it does impact journalists, especially entry-level journalists, because nobody wants to give you more than $30,000, and I need a $40,000 salary to kind of live where the job is.
A lot of people, there's like to blame, like all of these different things. It's the pay. Like, I promise you, it is the pay.
The likelihood is that if I go into journalism, it will be something like print media or, a basic salary worker making $50,000, $60,000 a year. I realized that's not sustainable. That's not something I can provide for a family with. And it's something that I kind of have to get away from right now before it's too late.
But on top of that, journalism is a competitive industry, and that alone has pushed students away.
That kind of culture is what deterred me away from also wanting to work, being a reporter for broadcast or print or wherever, because I felt that it can turn quite toxic. It's turned toxic with the students as well.
I felt that the competition for broadcasting, sports broadcasting specifically, was way too high. There's just too many people going for the same thing that I wanted to do.
The competition in journalism is like brutal, and that's another reason why I didn't go into it, because I'm like, we're competing to make pennies for me to be barely able to live after college.
It kind of like makes you rethink about if you even deserve to be there, or even if you have like the chops to do the work in journalism, because it is so cutthroat.
And I also think the competition within journalism is one of the reasons why people don't trust journalists as much as they used to. A lot of writers and reporters write for the sake of other journalists and to impress other journalists than they do to actually inform the public.
The way that misinformation spreads online, we need journalism more than ever, and yet we continue to have these issues where people don't believe journalists.
I don't want to be attacked for sharing somebody's story and for somebody to trust me with that story and then have it be attacked by someone who thinks that I might have an agenda.
We just need more local newsrooms, like really micro local newsrooms. So the fact that we're laying off more than we're hiring right now, like, I do genuinely think it's a not just threat to democracy, but just to these local communities.
That's terrifying. Like, I might not have a job. Do I think there's going to be local journalism? Sure. I think local journalism is going to survive as long as people are continuing to support local journalism. But that's on such a small scale, or some local community papers are on such a small scale that it's kind of tedious to be working there.
Some students, however, are more confident about the fate of local journalism.
You know, especially I noticed it with this being an election year. I think that it's so important with politics, for example, that we're localizing national stories, or with politics, we're localizing, you know, if so-and-so wins at the national level, what does this mean for us here in the middle of nowhere, Alabama or whatever, you know? So I think that that's where it kind of starts.
I think the future of journalism is social media, and a lot of newsrooms, I think, need to realize that and need to catch up with the times, because if they don't, then they're just going to be left in the dust.
But some students see the move towards social media as a positive and recognize that it's the future. If there's any good news in that, perhaps it's that there are more job opportunities to deliver new forms of media.
News publications are definitely investing more time and more money into roles that are social media managers, social media marketers, or hiring those people that have that past social media marketing experience to find new ways to deliver news to an audience that no longer wants to be fed through paper or TV.
As journalists, we have to be willing to pivot and willing to adapt, and that's why so many things are moving to digital and to streaming and to social media. Like, there's other mediums and there's ways to still continue to use these skills that we have.
And while some journalists may be more willing to adapt than others, young people recognize that the industry is changing, whether they like it or not. One of the major changes that has startled some students is the rapid implementation of artificial intelligence.
I had a few student reporters call me saying they're doing a project and want to talk to me about it. So I helped them out. And one of them told me, you are the only person that I have talked to that is against AI in newsrooms. Everybody is for it, which was mind-boggling to me. I'm like, this is why we can't get hired anywhere, because there is software that is taking over our job.
In a profession defined by change and adversity, it's the passion of young journalists that will shape its future. Fear may be inevitable, but in many cases, it can push young journalists to find new ways to connect with their audience and hold the world accountable. So, will these fears define the next generation of journalists, or will they be the driving force behind a new era in journalism? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: the voices of young journalists will continue to shape the stories that matter the most. And for now, the future of journalism is in their hands.